We have done it. 1 year. 1 year today. 365 days of this racket.
Racket is virtual agape. That's what this is. A feast of
virtual agape. I love it. That's right. That's right.
Brotherly and sisterly love. Yeah, 1 year.
Yes. Well, congratulations to you guys and me too from our very humble beginnings. And the first broadcast, I sat in my brother's backyard and we were all in different places, different times. Yeah. Yeah. Different wormholes, but we connected and we've made it this far and is just the first year.
And thanks everybody in the audience for sticking with us so we're not spending our Monday night screaming into the abyss, and the audience has grown steadily. We've held on to our original audience and gained new ones, so we can't complain. Thank you. We
spend the other 6 days of the week screaming into the abyss. Mondays are great, though. Mondays are fantastic.
I love Mondays. Fucking love Mondays. Yeah, I used to kind of like dread. I used to get the Sunday dreads. Not dreadlocks, but like dreading Monday. But now it's like Monday afternoons here at 1 p.m. are a very special kind of sacred time. And yeah, I definitely love these Mondays now because of the show. And I wanted to say thank you to everybody tuning in today for this 47th episode of The Week in Strange. Everybody there on Facebook tuning in live, and also to all of our patrons. We had a number of new Patreon supporters subscribed to us last week. So thank you each and every one of you who's been subscribing to our Patreon and to Thomas's Patreon. Thomas, yours is Thomas Sheridan, patreon.com/thomassheridan. So yeah, Thomas's, yeah.
Thanks again to everyone there. This is basically paying for all the films, that one, so, and the trips, and we've been able to help other people that work with us and buy new equipment and buy stock footage when we couldn't afford to rent helicopters. But it's all adds up to something beautiful in the end. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It's been really helpful, and it's helping pay for the trip to England, where Timoney and I are going to be flying out there for the premiere of the Atlantis film at the Mysterious Earth Conference. So that's Neil's conference, right, Thomas? He's the one hosting it.
Yeah, the second weekend in September in Preston. Actually, Neil is in Ireland at the moment. I'm supposed to catch up with him. I don't know if I will, but yeah, we will be doing another promo on that conference shortly anyway. We will be doing another promo on it.
Awesome. So yeah, all that Patreon support, that money in the form of money helps put these trips together, helps put these films together, and we'll be putting Timoney and myself onto a plane and over to England for that premiere. So to meet all of you wonderful folks who are going to be there at the Mysterious Earth Conference. So definitely looking forward to that. And I'd like to turn over the mic to our host Timoney here for the episode.
Yep. Again, I love and appreciate the family that we've built with Beyond Room 313. It's one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my whole life. So thank you guys. And without further ado, here we go. This year's extreme weather is just getting started. Okay, here we go. For a second or two, it teeters on the raging torrent's edge, and then the house, the entire building, pivots and slides into the river. Oh my God, gasped witnesses filming the moment as they watched the structure tumble and then float away. A devastating flood has just ripped through Yellowstone National Park in the western United States. That's some pretty extraordinary stuff happening, stuff that is not common at all, says Paul Pastelok, lead long-range forecaster at AccuWeather, as he lists this and other examples of extreme weather events cropping up in the U.S. this year. Already 2022 has brought powerful floods, terrifying wildfires, and unusually early heat waves globally, notably those in India and Pakistan, Europe, the U.S., and parts of East Asia. Freak hailstorms have battered Germany and Mexico City, and U.S. forecasters expect an above-normal hurricane season. Meteorologists say that many of these events are part of a troubling trend. While 2022 is not yet the worst year on record for extreme weather, we are currently witnessing the impact of climate change and the cascading effect of one problematic weather condition influencing another. Take the Yellowstone flood as an example. While still the subject of meteorological investigation, there are signs that it was caused in part by a long winter that extended into the spring, packing the mountains with snow and ice, and then an unusual sudden warm surge in May. The first melt filled the rivers, and then the second warm phase in early June here just knocked it out of their banks. Pastelok also highlights the three derechos, large, long-lasting thunderstorms that move in a relatively straight line that have hit the U.S. so far this year. Weirdly, two of them have moved into a southwest to northeast direction, which is very unusual. One of those derechos wreaked havoc in Canada, causing 11 deaths and cutting power to 1 million homes. And it seems there's more extreme weather on the way. Unfortunately, it does look like another active hurricane season coming up. Says Phil Clausback, research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University. He and other forecasters expect an above normal Atlantic hurricane season this year. On average, 7 storms in this region become strong enough to be categorized as hurricanes each year. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is forecasting between 6 and 10 for 2022, while Clausback thinks 10 is most likely. The major culprit here is La Nina, a cyclical natural weather phenomenon that results in cooler ocean temperatures in the eastern central Pacific Ocean and warmer temperatures in the Atlantic. La Nina also reduces wind shear in the Atlantic, meaning that cyclones have a greater chance of building up in the atmosphere and becoming strong enough to be classified as hurricanes. Episodes of La Nina typically occur every 2 to 7 years and usually last between 9 and 12 months. What's unusual is that the current La Nina event has lasted for 2 winters now and may even continue into 2023. If that happens, it would be the third such long-lasting La Nina since 1950. Overall, we're tending to see more frequent La Nina events, and they're tending to be stronger. This is actually the opposite of what most climate models says. There's a big discussion as to whether this is some natural variability. La Nina has all kinds of effects on the weather, not just on hurricanes. It could exacerbate drought in the southwestern U.S., for example. Ultimately, a potent mix of climate change effects and natural variability are hammering some parts of the world right now. Take that with a grain of salt, please. If a large number of hurricanes do show up in the Atlantic this year, no one knows how likely they are to actually make landfall. But he adds that he hopes people are prepared for the worst, just in case. With the rising sea levels, I just think the surge is going to be insane if one of these systems comes up the East Coast. However, the deadliest weather events in many parts of the world, including the U.S., are heat waves. Let's see. In this year's uncommonly early heat waves, for example, in India, where temperatures reached a record 49.2 degrees Celsius, France, which has recorded its earliest 40-degree day ever, and swaths of the U.S., where 100 million people have been advised to stay indoors, are particularly worrisome. The health effects are often worse in early heat waves than later in the summer when our bodies have acclimatized. People should ensure that they stay hydrated and avoid going out during the hottest part of the day. If it's not possible to stay sufficiently cool at home, you might be able to access air conditioning in a public building. It may be time to rethink architecture in places that were less accustomed to hot weather. Oh, geez, let's see. Okay. There are alternative ways of lowering temperatures inside buildings. You can replace the roof with a more reflective roof, and it will reduce the local urban heat island temperature. Even as anthropogenic climate change causes heat waves to become more frequent, longer lasting, and more intense, some countries still lack widespread awareness of extreme heat events. Most of the African countries have no definition of a heat wave, so weather services are not recording or reporting if temperatures are unusual. In the time that I've been at the Met Office since the end of 2015, I've witnessed the hottest day in the UK. I've seen the highest temperatures globally and the warmest winter day, says Graham Mage, a spokesperson for the UK Met Office. Even over fairly short periods, we can expect records to be broken. Referring to the excessive temperatures in the US right now, David Robinson, a climate scientist at Rutgers University and the New Jersey State climatologist, says ridges of high pressure in the atmosphere which force air groundward, Jesus Christ, are partly to blame. It heats up, reduces cloud cover, and allows more sun to bake the ground, he explains. That scorched earth soaks up even more heat, and this can create persistently hot conditions.
I hate that they always go in this direction of climate change whenever there's any sort of change in the climate. But I want to bring up the interesting climate stuff, the interesting weather stuff that Thomas shared a cool article with us yesterday to post into the group, that video of the mini tsunamis there. And Thomas, where was that area in Ireland again, the Gulf?
It was called Union Hall, was the name of the fishing village, and it's just about 20 or 30 miles west of Cork City. It's a very pretty touristy kind of fishing recreational area. The fisherman or the guy in the boat is filming what looks like the actual bay, which is a sizable bay, is emptying out like prior to a tsunami. Now, it's very interesting because that's basically what happened in the late 1700s when the tsunami that destroyed Lisbon and basically ended the Portuguese Empire, and that showed up in the very same parts of Europe as well, and it showed up in a very similar way. So we have to wonder if that active seismic area under the Atlantic that caused the enormous tsunami in 1700 and something is back. But there was a very strange video. There's also a lot of military weird stuff going on off the coast there. The French basically sent out a message that don't wander into this zone. It's dangerous, or you might get hit by a ship or something. And there's a British warship called the HMS Enterprise actually docked in Cork City Harbour. And I've been trying to find out what kind of ship the Enterprise is. What does it do? But it's all very strange stuff. It's starting to remind me of the Deepwater Horizon oddness in 2009, I think it was, in the Gulf of Mexico, where the French, again, were involved in a very secret thing underneath the sea that led to all kinds of rumors and shenanigans put out there. I don't know. The whole article kept swinging it towards the climate change propaganda. It's a great cover story for hiding things they can't understand. But I'm more, when you said the El Nino, I think that's like, I've always been interested in that phenomena. And before climate change was a thing, I can remember news reports always saying what was caused by El Nino. And since the climate change religion came along, El Nino is hardly ever spoken about, even though it was a essential element of weather forecasting globally.
Didn't that come about, La Nina and El Nino, about that same time? Was it like the mid 1990s? I want to say I started hearing that terminology, right? Or did
I heard it earlier I remember hearing it in the 80s, to be honest.
Oh, okay. I think maybe I was just getting old enough to be paying attention to the news and then hearing that term when I was,
I don't remember when I was very young, but I do remember I left high school in 82. And I do remember the school teacher talking about this effect in the Pacific that changed. So it wasn't a big deal,
Yeah. I was just curious if that corresponded with the kind of the bringing about when they started talking about global warming was the term that they used. That was the late 70s, right? When they came up with that term, and then they changed it to climate change here in the last few years.
Oh, the global warming thing only really showed up around 1990.
Okay. So, all right. That's interesting. Yeah. That whole
thing before that was the ozone layer, which
that's right.
ended up they were blaming on
hairspray
and spray paint. Yeah. And CFCs, but it turns out that the thing had healed itself automatically and secular.
Yeah. Oh, just good old chlorofluorocarbons. Yeah. 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 I remember chlorofluorocarbons. Yeah. Chloroform carbon.
Aquanet hairspray.
Yep.
The can used to weigh a ton, I remember. And wasn't the hairspray I used. I used Paul Mitchell watermelon one, which had an air pump. Not because it was saving the planet, but because it smelled of watermelons.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to take it in the direction of the. We've talked about the pole shift before on the show, and it's a repeating theme that comes back for me every few years or so, and it's been coming back in more frequency for me as far as my interest in that. And I do wonder if that's what we are experiencing now with some of these strange weather events occurring. Before the show, Timothy Thomas and I were talking about just some of the strangeness in the weather that we're experiencing, both that you guys are experiencing over there in Ireland and that we're also experiencing here in the Pacific Northwest and in the United States. It's been unseasonably cool here in June, almost the solstice right now. And, we were just having mid 50s, high 50s weather a few days ago. And today it's 70 something outside. And about a year ago, it was nearly 110, 115 degrees this time of year. So it almost does, to me, seem like there may be something to this pole shift thing. And perhaps, I don't know if we're in the middle of one, where if there are any astronomers or amateur astronomers out there who are keeping track of stars being in the right place in the night sky. I don't know if that's a way we can track pole flips.
You could if you had a go-to scope that had the computer software. But you can also, anecdotally and pure tinfoil hat, my method here, I've seen this, the light shine on the side of the house in the morning that I never noticed before. The sun never hit that side of the house. And the light got into the living room, which I don't ever remember that ever happening. Now, it could have been a case if I didn't notice it or something like that, but I just thought that was so bizarre to see light coming in a room, sunlight coming in early morning, where I never noticed it before.
Someone like you would be very sensitive to those things. So you would notice like, that light's different, that's so, you're a visual artist. So someone's like you pays a close attention to that. And for you to see different lighting like that, like a cat, the cat's going to notice the new ways that the light reflects in the room.
I can expand on that in a very interesting but slightly different way. The sunlight is definitely different than when I was a kid. When I first started drawing and sketching and taking photographs, now you could say it was because the film saturation was different back on cameras back then. No, it wasn't. The pictures were the same, whether I used Kodak, Agfa, or Fuji film. The shadows had a purple tint, absolutely. And if you look at paintings, you look at David Hockney's paintings from the 60s, he paints the shadows with a purple tint. Something happened in the 90s and the sun changed. And the sunlight shadows became more a cold, pale blue. And the artist started painting shadows with a blue paint rather than our usual purple. So definitely, I can tell you for a fact that light definitely did change. The quality of sunlight in terms of the actual spectrum aspect, absolutely, in my life has changed. It was all purple all my life until about mid-90s, and I started seeing blue coming into the shadows.
And there's the other one with the quality of the light from the sun. A number of people talk about this. The sun used to be yellow, and now it's this white, and now it's going more blue. We have like a nearly white blue sun now. And I can remember being very young and seeing a yellow and an orange sun. And we still draw, little kid style drawings with a yellow sun. We naturally gravitate towards the yellow crayon or whatever it is to draw a sun. And if you look up in this, the midday sky now, it's a white sun, almost blue. Don't look at the sun, right? Yeah. Don't go out there and sun gaze. All that bullshit from a few years ago where the New Agers were trying to convince people to sun gaze. Maybe that's why all the New Agers are all whacked out now, because they stared at the sun for too long. But yeah, look on the bright side. You'll be able to live high on the hog and disability for the rest of your life. Right. Get in. Yeah. But the quality of the sun, like you're talking about, Thomas. So it's not just. There's a number of things that are different now. The quality of the sun, the declination of the sun, is that the term with the angle of the sun to the delineation, declination. Yep. But it as Timothy said, the angle of the dangle. I'm just repeating everything you're saying and cracking up. But the angle of the dangle of the sun, it's different. To me, it feels like we're at a more northern latitude. Like I've only lived in the Pacific Northwest since 2016 in the springtime. And I do remember now around the solstice, the summer solstice, the sun coming up earlier than what I was used to and staying out later. But now it's like, the other day we're up till, it was like 3:45 in the morning and I started seeing sunlight, like the blue part of dawn right after the darkest part. It was like literally there's 3:30 in the morning, and then a few minutes later, there's that little bit of blue that the sun's going to be cresting over the horizon soon. That lovely color blue. I love that kind of. It's not twilight, but whatever that is, was at 3:45. Say again. The blue hour, the Scandinavian blue hour. Yeah. Yeah. It's very pleasant light. Yeah. I love the stillness of that part of the day. Yeah, it's the way I always equate it, because I'm whatever that is where you mix visuals and sounds, audio, whatever. But I always imagine with that light, the beginning of Richard Strauss's Also Sprach Zarathustra, that they use in 2001: A Space Odyssey. But it's like that low C on the organ and on the basses tuned down to C. There's just that rumble with the contrabassoon right before the trumpet comes in on that first note. But it's like that blue hour reminds me of the beginning of Also Sprach Zarathustra with that rumbling there. So I think of that as it's in the blue hour, as you're saying. But with all this being said, going back to what I was talking about a minute ago, none of it having to do with climate change, religion, the idea of the poles shifting, not necessarily doing the quick jostle right now that some people talk about, but the idea that maybe they're creeping, and that we here at, what are we, like 41 degrees, I want to say we're a little higher than we're supposed to be right now. So I'm curious, and maybe the equator is in a different place now. And that's why parts of the Midwest of the United States and Texas and everything are having these drought problems, and they're having high temperatures, is perhaps the equator is in a different place now too. So I just do wonder. I know that Ben over at Suspicious Observers has a great documentary and series on this. He kind of goes like more of the disaster kind of talk about it, which you have to take with a grain of salt. But I do appreciate his research and the way that he puts it in such just like a sober, scientific, fact-based way. So I know there's a couple people out there. Kathy, I think you're subscribed to him too. But I like the way that he puts things. So putting a little shout out there to Ben at Suspicious Observers and his cool stuff that he does there. But I do wonder, I don't know what you guys think about this. Is there something to this whole pole flip concept? And is that, I'm getting roundabout to what I'm trying to say, is that what's causing this extreme weather? Is whatever's going on? It's not just on Earth, it's on all the planets. There's change right now occurring on everything. So it's like, there was another article we were looking at where they're talking about like there's trash on Mars, human trash on Mars from all the space missions, and there's talk about climate change on Mars and all this bullshit. It's like it's like they're trying really hard to use one of their terms to debunk the concept that there's anything going on the other planets besides Earth right now. It's like they're trying so hard to cover up the fact that Mars's climate is changing, that Saturn's climate's changing, that Jupiter's climate's changing, that the sun is changing. So there's something going on, and I think it's a natural cycle. I've said this a number of times. We're not in the end times. There's nothing biblical like that, but it's, this 12,500 year cycle with the ice ages, when Atlantis went underwater last time. Are we at something like that again? Is that something that you guys have any thoughts about?
Are they using Aquanet hairspray on Uranus?
All the butt jokes. What Tina and Samantha are talking about in the comments is commonly known as butt chugging.
What's that?
I guess I'm the one left to demonstrate this one. I mean, not demonstrate. God damn it! I'm going to edit that out to define this. So
we're going outside.
So you know what a beer bong is, Thomas?
No.
All right. So welcome to Millennial Worlds. So so chugging, butt chugging is putting a funnel in someone's butt and pouring the alcohol.
Talking about the sunlight.
What you said, butt chugging?
Yeah, the light.
What is butt chugging? You get so pissed off right now.
But why would you want to do that? What's the appeal?
Quicker, it goes into your system like that.
No. Okay.
What are you talking about?
You did not read the comments.
No, I'm trying to talk. I can't talk and read at the same time.
New age butt chugging, sunlight. So you get naked and then you I've only seen pictures of it. Never done it.
I know. You point your rusty sheriff's badge at the sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's a great.
So Jason will now demonstrate.
It's great if you have a hemorrhoids as well. It's a nice, cool, breezy day.
Timothy was asking me to define butt chugging. I was giving it the only definition I knew, where you use your colon, the last whatever foot of intestine, because it has the most absorption. So if you take so Thomas, that's how you define butt chug. We're going to get banned off of YouTube and Facebook now. I'm going to have to edit these couple minutes out.
No way. This is the best part.
but I'm glad we're getting some laugh emojis. So yeah, there's the two definitions of butt chugging. I didn't know the one that Tina, thank you. I wasn't reading the comments at all. I was talking and not paying attention to the comments, but so I guess there is solar butt chugging, which I guess, yeah, it's a good thing if you get sun on anywhere. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking.
You'll have to forgive us. All right. Will you do this thing? You'll have to forgive us. We have maturity issues, hindrances. Okay.
Fuck, I need the other picture.
Okay. Okay. The bizarre Russian prophet rumored to have Putin's ear. Alexander Dugin hates America and is obsessed with Nazis, the occult, and the end times. The madness of Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine has once again turned the spotlight on the creepy, enigmatic guru who has been called Putin's brain, or irresistibly, Putin's Rasputin, maverick political philosopher Alexander Dugin. And indeed, in many ways, this is Dugin's moment. For more than a quarter century, he has been talking about an eternal civilizational war between Russia and the West, and about Russia's destiny to build a vast Eurasian empire. Beginning with a reconquista of Ukraine. Both the war in Ukraine and the new Cold War against the West can be said to represent the triumph or the debacle of Dugin's vision. The 60-year-old Dugin may or may not be Putin's whisperer. There is no evidence that the two men have actually met. But his influence on the Putin-era ruling class in Russia is unquestionably real and scary. For one thing, much as the word fascist gets frivolously thrown around, Dugin is actually a one-time self-proclaimed fascist, albeit one of the real fascism has never been tried variety. What's more, there is every reason to think that while he dropped the label, his ideology has not changed much. But even that underestimates the sheer weirdness of the man described in a 2017 book on the rise of Russia's new nationalism as a former dissident, pamphleteer, hipster, and guitar-playing poet who emerged from the libertine era of pre-perestroika Muscovite Bohemia to become a rabble-rousing intellectual, a lecturer at the military academy, and ultimately a Kremlin operative. For instance, Dugin has had a lifelong obsession with the occult, ranging from the legacy of magician Aleister Crowley. A 1995 video shows him reciting a poem at a ceremony honoring Crowley in Moscow, to much more sinister Nazi occultism. His first appearance on Russian television in 1992 was an expert commentator in a Shylocky documentary that explored the esoteric secrets of the Third Reich, which he claimed to have studied in KGB archives. He now rails against Ukrainian Nazis, but once penned a poem in which the apocalyptic advent of an avatar culminates in a radiant Himmler rising from the grave. While he later tried to disown this verse, it was posted on his website under a name he has elsewhere acknowledged as his pseudonym. Dugin's Dugin has also included a 1997 essay proposing that the notorious Russian serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, who gruesomely murdered more than 50 young women and children between 1978 and 1990, should be regarded as a practitioner of Dionysian sacraments in which the killer, torturer, and the victim transcend their metaphysical dualism and become one. He talks casually and cheerfully about living in the end times. He preaches national and religious revival, but can also, according to Clover, make such quips as, there are only two real things in Russia, oil sales and theft. The rest is all a kind of theater. Many details of Dugin's life are obscure, no doubt due to some extent to deliberate mystification on his part. It has been claimed, for instance, that his father was either a colonel or a lieutenant general in the GRU, the fearsome Soviet military intelligence agency, and used this position both to protect him and perhaps to facilitate his access to the military and intelligence elites. Extremism researcher Anton Shekasatosov, I'm sure I did not say that right, who has delved into Dugin's background, asserts that the reality is far more prosaic and that Dugin was an officer in the Soviet, later Russian Customs Service. According to Clover, Dugin has claimed that his rebellious youthful antics, which included involvement at 19 in an underground circle that dabbled in mysticism with a neo-fascist slant, which caused his father to be transferred from the GRU to the Customs Service. but Clover also quotes Dugan as saying that his father never supported him and that they barely had a relationship. Expelled from college for his unorthodox activities, which included the translation and samizdat publication of Pagan Imperialism by Italian far-right intellectual Julius Evola, another fascist with a mystical bent, Dugan made a living for a while as a language tutor and freelance translator. But he clearly wanted more, and the changes under Mikhail Gorbachev, which included a drastic relaxation of state control over intellectual and political life, opened up new avenues. In 1988, Dugan got involved in Pamyat Memory, a patriotic and anti-Zionist movement notorious for its anti-Semitism, but was eventually expelled for murky reasons, Satanism, according to some. He also traveled to Europe and cultivated ties with far-right figures such as French counter-Enlightenment author Alain de Benoist. Interestingly, despite benefiting from the reforms, Dugan sympathized with the hardline coup against Gorbachev in August 1991 and reportedly even tried to get weapons so that he could volunteer to fight for the coup plotters. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Dugan became involved in various marginal groups that lived in the horseshoe theory by trying to synthesize far-left and far-right ideology, including the Red-Brown National Bolshevik Party, which he co-founded with the eccentric poet Eduard Limonov. In 1992, Dugan essay tried to reclaim the term red-brown as a positive thing, the natural colors of our blood and our soil. Another piece from 1997 hailed the dawn of a new Russian fascism, boundless as our land and as red as our blood. At first, Dugan's efforts to enter public life did not get him very far. When he ran for the Duma in 1995 on a national Bolshevik platform in St. Petersburg, he got less than 1% of the vote, despite a tantalizing campaign poster promising that the secrets will be unveiled. Yet he was helped by mysterious connections to the Russian military. At some point during the 90s, he became a lecturer at the Senior Staff College of the Russian military, the Military Academy of General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia. Considering that we're talking about a neo-fascist crank with a fixation on the occult, this raises eyebrows. Dugan's true breakthrough, however, was in the 1997 book, Foundations of Geopolitics, The Geopolitical Future of Russia. A 600-page treaty that not only sold well, but made its author a respectable pundit. It also quickly became part of the curriculum at the General Staff Academy, other military and police academies, and some elite institutions of higher learning. Writing in the journal Harvard Ukrainian Studies in early 2004, the issue is dated spring 2001, but was obviously published later, since the article refers to events from late 2003. Hoover Institution scholar John B. Dunlop concluded, "There has perhaps not been another book published in Russia during the post-communist period that has exerted an influence on Russian military, police, and foreign policy elites comparable to that of The Foundations of Geopolitics." A prolific scribbler, Dugan has published 7 other books between 1990 and 1997, but Foundations of Geopolitics was his first effort to go mainstream. The earlier books had been heavy on occult lore about numerology and other mystical sciences, the lost and magical Hyperborean race, and esoteric orders such as the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and the Rosicrucians. Dugan's 1992 book, Conspiriology, for example, had framed the historical conflicts between reason and faith as a literal struggle between two secret organizations, the Rationalist Order of the Deadhead and the Faith and Love-based Order of the Living Heart, and that's the condensed and coherent version. Foundations of Geopolitics, on which Clover believes Dugan may have had help from faculty members at the General Staff Academy, offered a much more sober analysis and steered clear of mysticism and occult metaphysics. Yet the theme of a cosmic battle between good and evil was still very much a part of Dugan's thesis. Foundations of Geopolitics posits a fundamental antagonism between land-based and seafaring civilizations, or Eurasianism and Atlanticism, the latter represented primarily by the United States and England, the former by Russia. While the idea of conflict between land-based and seafaring powers was borrowed from the fairly obscure Edwardian British geographer Halford Mackinder, Dugan reconceptualized this rivalry as a spiritual struggle, in terms drawn largely from 20th century German anti-liberal philosopher and prominent Nazi Carl Schmitt, with additional borrowings from earlier Eurasianist intellect Lev Gumilev, son of 2 celebrated poets, and thought that ethnicity derived from space radiation. In Dugin's scheme, the values of land-based civilization are those of traditionalism. The hardness of the land is culturally embodied in the hardness and stability of social traditions. Community, faith, service, and the subordination of the individual to the group and to authority, while the values of seafaring civilization are mobility, trade, innovation, rationality, political freedom, and individualism. The other central message of the book is that for Russia, it's empire or bust. Dugin asserted that Russian nationalism has a global scope, associated more with space than with blood ties. Outside of empire, Russians lose their identity and disappear as a nation. In his vision, Russia's destiny is to lead a Eurasian empire that stretches from Dublin to Vladivostok. In a country reeling from a botched transition to a market-based democracy and coping with the abrupt loss of superpower status, this call to imperial greatness fell on fertile soil, especially after the devastating economic crisis of 1998 seemed to be the death knell of liberal hopes. It was particularly welcome to the military and political elites. In short order, Dugin, only yesterday a marginal crank, became a pundit with close proximity to power. By 2001, he had formed close ties with individuals in the presidential administration, the secret services, the Russian military, and the leaders of the Duma. Among other things, he had become a consultant to Russian State Duma Speaker Gennady Seleznev and to stop Putin advisor Sergei Glaziev. The Russian media, then still relatively free, began to talk of Dugin's Uranianism as a new state-favored ideology. The Eurasian movement, which Dugin launched the same year to promote the Eurasian agenda and resist Atlanticist influences, attracted government officials, members of the establishment media, and retired and current members of intelligence and state security agendas. In 2003, the movement went international, claiming to have a presence in 29 countries in Europe, the Americas, the Middle East, including 36 chapters in the former Soviet republics. Its most active wing was the Eurasian Youth Union, heavily focused on pre-Kremlin activism in Ukraine. Among the group's more notable exploits was a 2007 attack vandalizing a Moscow exhibition on the Ukrainian Holodomor, a Stalin-era terror famine. Anyways, this is a really, really, really long article. We probably actually should have cut it down to make it more precise. But this guy's a little fascinating to me. This goes on and on. This is really long. This guy's, he's interesting to me, and I don't quite know what to make of him. I've only kind of recently heard about him this year, so I'm still researching into him and seeing what he's about.
I'm looking forward to reading that article because there's tons of research stuff in there. That's really cool stuff. Great find.
I'll post it in the group, and everybody can go and read it on their own time. We'll put it in the description box as well as a link. It's really good. I kind of tried to hit the major points in it to give us something to talk about, but we'll be here for another 10 minutes if I read the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, sexed up for a Western audience. I mean, they have, because of the trouble that's going on in Ukraine and everything they're trying to make out. They presented no evidence at all that Putin had anything to do with him. So that was just like a clickbait kind of thing. But I mean, it's like Russia's the last interesting country left in the world. It's like the only country, it's like the last interesting country on earth is Russia. Everywhere else is kind of like the same and boring, but they still kind of, they're nicely screwed up there for me still. There's still a lot of, I mean, I love the idea of a Crowley type character still existing somewhere in the world, and that's what this guy reminds you of. You also mentioned Julius Evola. And they talk about fascism, they have to understand, you ask the average person what fascism is, and they'll never give you the right definition. When Julius Evola talks of fascism, he's talking about a country that's run like a business. That's the original meaning of fascism. So, for instance, you have a civil service where people were promoted on merit or productivity rather than time served. The idea is that, like, the government should be productive and not just merely an administrative tool or bureaucracy. And that's what fascism means, running a country like it's a corporation. That's all it means. It means nothing else. It's only in recent times that they've turned that whole concept around into other things. but they actually even changed the definition in some dictionaries, I believe. But I mean, that's interesting stuff. I mean, the guy obviously has some serious influence if he gets a job at a military academy as a lecturer, and I want to find out more about this whole thing now. I want to cut through the meat and try and find out what's really going on, because it sounds to me like this is how you understand the world is true. It's a cult thing, and how you understand the culture is true. It's a cult thing. And the West has no occultism right now, so the West has no culture as far as I'm concerned. We're kind of like esoterically bankrupt and bereft.
Yeah, and what you said, Thomas, about him becoming a military lecturer, not just any military lecturer. I think I want to say the article said something about talking to general staff, meaning talking to general officers. So he wasn't there, talking at like the military academies, like talking to midshipmen and people turning into young lieutenants, but people who wear the stars on their collar. So I've always found it fascinating that the general staff and the admirals in the Navy wear stars as their insignia, and they're, the 5-pointed star. I think there's some real interesting stuff in there within the rank insignia, these occult symbols within the military that, most people wearing those and, the oak leaves and the stars and everything don't know the occult significance behind them, but there's still a tremendous occult significance there within the military that's fascinating to me, and I would like to learn more about and know more about. But yeah, they put them in front of generals, and this is interesting. And speaking to the thing about changing definitions, it's always interesting to see the way that they talk about. They always associate something about. They said in this article about anti-left Nazism and stuff, and they talk about the right being Nazis, but it's funny just because they weren't the Nazis National Socialists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they just like to associate the right with that word Nazi and do whatever they can with the social engineering to lump certain words together to have kind of a Pavlovian conditioning to people, like a knee-jerk reaction to certain words. So you say fascism, you say Nazi, and people like to associate, certain political figures with those words. So they do this weird kind of social engineering and Pavlovian conditioning to people. So it's like they don't change what don't change the words within documents, don't change the words within things, but change the definitions of the words is what they do. And you can go into the Webster's dictionary and some of these other big dictionaries, and they've changed the definition of terrorism. They've changed the definition, I'm sure, of fascism and some of these other terms. So it's a dumbing down of our population linguistically. I'm always trying to be better with the language I use, and it's something I strive for as I get older, and just having a better command over my own language, because that's exactly what the social engineers who are pulling the strings don't want you to do. They don't want you to have a control and command over your own language, because that's one of the easiest ways to use social engineering over people is through their language. So
what Timony said there about what caught my ear was the part about the serial killer. It almost sounded like the unification of the serial killer and his victims in a kind of an alchemical process. Now, that got me thinking. I mean, I've often thought there was something highly occultic about serial killers, and I'm not particularly sure why. But when you hear about things like the Jack the Ripper killings in England and how they were all connected to Freemasonry and all this other kind of thing, and then there's other stories of serial killers being hidden in Masonic lodges while they were on the run and stuff like this. Makes me, I want to know more about that as well. I mean, I've only kind of had a hunch that there was some occultic elements to serial killers, and we all know about the Zodiac killer. We all know about, the Son of Sam and all that stuff, but a lot of that could be sensationalism too. But that's the first time I've actually heard it described in the actual, what the rationale might be. That's a brand new one for me. The unification of the killer and the victims in a kind of a mass to bring forth a balancing of light or something. It's really interesting stuff, that.
Yeah, going on off on a tangent on that, to me it always seems like there's something so conspiratorial about the way that I've never had a real interest in serial killers or anything until I met you guys. I never looked into this, so I've learned about serial killers from both you and Timony, and watched a number of documentaries and kind of looked into these people, because before I just thought, oh, it's fucking disgusting, just terrible. Don't even want to put my attention there. But then starting to look into Charles Manson and MK Ultra, and the way that what are they called, Manchurian candidates. This idea of them going out there, whatever organization it is, going out there and activating people, conditioning them and activating them to go commit these atrocities, commit these terrible, terrible, terrible crimes against humanity. And the occult aspects of that is where I'm going. Just this idea of people sacrificially or ritually killing, but rather than the people themselves actually doing, rather than these dark lodges themselves actually having the blood on their hands, they psychically control or psychically, they psychically control these Manchurian candidates to do the dirty work for them, because you can't in a court of law prove that someone's been mind controlled by another party. There's no way to bring about any evidence that someone's a Manchurian candidate or a patsy or something. It's like they magic doesn't stand up. The occult doesn't stand up as far as testimony goes. It's like someone is, when there's evidence, like if there's blood on the person's hands, figuratively, they get charged for the crime. So it's this kind of seems like there's an occult aspect to some of these dark lodges committing these murders and these ritual sacrifices through someone else, so that the blood can't be put on their hands at all, so they can get off kind of scot free. And like you're saying, that kind of alchemical union there of the victim and the killer, them taking some kind of psychic charge out of that. And from what I understand, some of these dark lodges have interests in shaping the future of mankind in a way that they want it to be shaped in. Like you've talked about, was it the British Israelites, Thomas, where they're trying to bring about the Book of Revelations into present time. So it's seems like some of these black lodges have an idea of what they want the future of mankind to be, and they try to shape it through their own ritual. They try to, they create these real complex rituals to bring about their idea of what they want the future of mankind to be. So I wonder if that's what goes on with some of these ritual murders. If they're, that in certain wars, World War I, taking all that life force energy from the people who were killed on the battlefield and using it to charge, to create a psychic charge to maybe bring World War II about, and everything that came after World War II with NATO and the way, the creation of the state, certain creations of certain states and everything. So I wonder if some of these wars and ritual murders have anything to do with collecting charge for these big, elaborate, dark rituals.
The Russians have always been interested in the occult. I mean, I saw a documentary once about the Romanovs, and Nicholas and Alexandria, when they were first married, they were had the whole world at their feet. They were so happy. They were in love and all this stuff. And they went to see a mystic. Now, it's interesting how in the Russian church that mystics are allowed, they're okay. And the mystic compared Nicholas to the long-suffering Job of the Bible, that his reign would be terrible. It would be besieged by nothing but problems. And he'd be the last ever emperor of Russia. And one of the reasons why him and his family never made a serious run for it when the Bolsheviks took over and ended up in their assassination probably was because subconsciously he knew he had to fulfill a prophecy. It's terribly interesting stuff. But and then her whole involvement with Rasputin, which did get as far as sex magic and stuff like that, probably was a kind of an attempt as much to offset that prophecy as it was to cure her son.
That's interesting. And I wonder about prophecy sometimes too, if it's a intergenerational hex, that sometimes a prophecy that someone receives is actually a positive suggestion from a black magician, someone who interferes with the will of others. I've often wondered if that's how prophets work, if there's someone projecting into the psyche, into the consciousness of the prophet, we'll use that term, of the psychic, of the medium, ideas, and that medium gets kind of a fatalistic sense about that thing. Because I mean, I've experienced that before, where I have things come to me and I'm like, whoa, this came from elsewhere. And it gives, there's a certain special quality that feeling has. And I would imagine people who experience prophecy on a grand scale like that, or precognitive ideas, if that's something that is projected into them from Black magicians, and again, going over multiple generations, like multiple incarnations, I should say, not just generations, but these chess moves on the big chessboard of life, they take, I think, at least 3 lifetimes to start to move the pieces. People who incarnate as their own great grandson or their own great grandchild kind of thing within these, not just royal bloodlines, but in the secret unknowns, as you call them, Thomas, as we've adopted that. The people who we never see, we don't know their names, we don't know what country they're in, we don't know what nationality they are or anything, but there are those secret unknowns who use nations and who use presidents and monarchs as pieces. We tend to think that the presidents and the monarchs are players. No, they are the bishops and kings on the chessboard, and there are hands playing them. So I do wonder if these prophets throughout time aren't necessarily communicating with the daemon as we talk about on here, but sometimes I'm sure they are. Most of the time, probably. But I wonder if there are instances like this with the sense of fatalism. If there's a Black magician or a group of Black magicians, a Black lodge, projecting their desired outcome into the mind of someone who's susceptible to mock up their idea. So just like I was talking about, like them finding a patsy to commit a murder, them finding a magical patsy, so to speak, a prophet to manifest and mock up their own idea of what the future should be, so that person gets this sense of fatalism. So I've always had a trouble with the concept of fatalism. There's this real sense lately in our society since around, I want to say like 2015, just a real fatalistic sense of things are supposed to be this way. Things are supposed to go in this direction. And I always have a real big problem with that, being someone who's very much in like, no, free will is a real thing. Like I'm 100% a free will type. I think predestination can occur based on certain decisions made, but predestination can be shifted. We're not set on a particular path the way that, certain religions will say that, no, there's, whatever, God's will or something, and God's will is going to go a certain way. So anyway, fatalism, I'm not a big fan of it. And I think some of these magicians, these prophets, I should say, get influenced by Black magicians.
That story will open a can of worms that will keep us going here for a long time.
Yeah, we could have a whole show just on that. That would be interesting. Okay, but we're going to move along because we're already an hour in and only 2 stories. So here we go. Oh, shit. Yeah. Okay. Bill Gates has radical plans to change our food and what is on the menu. If Bill Gates has his way, the food in our future will little resemble what's on our plates today. Gates and his agribusiness industry partners are proposing to transform our food and how it is produced. To the techno-food industrialists, hunger and climate change are problems to be solved with data and engineering. The core ingredients of their revolutionary plan, genetic engineering and patenting of everything from seeds and food to animals to microbes in the soil to the processes we use to make the food. Local food cultures and traditional diets could fade away as food production moves indoors to labs that cultivates fake meat and ultra-processed foods. Gates says rich countries should shift entirely to synthetic beef, and he has the intellectual property rights to sell them. As a food that can help fix the climate, Gates touts the Impossible Burger, a plant-based patty made from genetically engineered soy and textured with engineered yeast. Its manufacturer, the Gates-funded Impossible Foods, has 24 patents and more than 100 patents pending to artificially replicate cheese, beef, and chicken and permeate these products with manufactured flavors, scents, and textures. Ginkgo Bioworks, a Gates-backed startup that makes custom organisms, just went public in a $17.5 billion deal. The company uses its cell programming technology to genetically engineer flavors and scents into commercial strains of engineered yeast and bacteria to create natural ingredients. Natural is in quotes, including vitamins, amino acids, enzymes, and flavor for ultra-processed foods. According to its investor presentation, Ginkgo plans to create up to 20,000 engineered cell programs. It now has 5 for food products and many other uses. Axios reports that the company plans to charge customers to use its biological platform, like Amazon charges for its data center, and it will take royalties like apps in the Apple Store. Ginkgo's customers, the investor pitch makes clear, are not consumers or farmers, but rather the world's largest chemical, food, and pharmaceutical companies. If techno-food products are not high on most consumers' shopping lists, this is a menu investors can get behind. The market for genetically engineered products has the potential to reach $2 to $4 trillion in the next 20 years. And Bill and Melinda Gates are positioned to reap the rewards. The Gates back a multitude of agri-food tech startups, reports Ag Funder News, either through private investment vehicles or through the Gates Foundation Trust, which funds the foundation's charitable activities. Gates and the tech startups pitch their products as solutions for our most challenging environmental and social issues, but are they really? Doubling down on monocultures. Gates' winning strategy for food and farming, according to a recent Fortune magazine article by Sean Tully, is finding ways for farmers to produce more corn and soybeans on every acre, while substantially lowering carbon emissions. Gates believes that genetically modified seeds and chemical herbicides in the right doses and not land-intensive organic farming are crucial to curbing carbon emissions. Since 2006, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent over $5 billion on efforts to transform African agriculture. Its flagship program, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, works to transition farmers to high-input industrial agriculture and scale up markets for commercial seeds and agrochemicals. Gates says these methods can boost production and lift farmers out of poverty. Many critics, including African faith leaders and hundreds of civil society groups around the world, say the foundation's agriculture development strategies are failing to deliver on promises and benefiting multinational corporations over small farmers and communities in Africa. The foundation did not respond to our request for comment. Gates has influenced the direction of agriculture to benefit the corporations, says Milian Belay, coordinator of Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, a coalition of 50 Africa-based groups. His foundation has contributed hugely in weakening our seed, biosafety, and agrochemical-related regulations. It will take years to undo what they have done. Gates also influences how governments and academic institutions think about the future of agriculture in Africa. The narrative now is you need to use agrochemicals, high-yield varieties, GMOs, and a host of other farm management techniques to feed yourself. It will also take years to convince our elites the future is agroecology. As one of the most rich and powerful people on the planet, the doors of our governments are open to Gates, while it is ajar for African citizens. He has to be called out and has to change the direction. Leading experts in food security and nutrition are calling for a paradigm shift away from green revolution-style industrial agriculture and toward agroecology, which promotes biodiversity instead of monocultures, integrates animals to rebuild soils, and advocates for political and economic reforms to address inequities and social divisions. Diversified agroecological systems are more resilient, they say, and have a greater capacity to recover from disturbances, including extreme weather events, pests, and disease. Recent science suggests that chemical-intensive industrial agriculture is a key driver of climate change, soil erosion, and the worldwide decline of insects. Corn and soy monocultures are especially problematic. They deplete the soil and rely on synthetic fertilizers that emit nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas 300 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at warming the atmosphere. These are problems Bill Gates is hoping technology can fix. Fortune also describes Gates' plan to intensify corn and soy production as a pivotal campaign in the war against global warming. How so? Syngenta, the world's second largest agrochemical company, is deploying big data, gene editing, DNA analysis, and other groundbreaking technologies in pursuit of growing bumper harvests while lowering CO2. Bayer, the leading chemical and seed firm, is making a similar pitch and claims its new sustainability technologies will empower 100 million smallholder farmers around the world. For 30 years, agrochemical companies promised GMOs could feed the poor and help small farmers, but it hasn't worked out that way at all. Most GMO crops in the ground today are engineered to survive weed-killing chemicals or kill insects. For some farmers, these crops provide short-term benefits, but they provide no benefits to consumers, nor did they deliver on promises to boost yields, and they did increase herbicide use. Evidence now indicates the crops are failing as weeds and bugs evolve around technology. And there are many documented GMO failures across the global south. See, for example, the GM cotton failure in Burkina, the commercial seed and pesticide debt treadmill for farmers in India, and 23 years of biodiversity loss and escalating hunger in South Africa.
If the Christians are right about the Antichrist, then that fucker is the Antichrist.
100%.
Absolutely. Candace Owens recently called him the world's #1 bioterrorist. And it's not, he absolutely is. That guy is out of control. Yep. He literally needs to be removed off this planet. He's literally gaslighting life on this planet. It has been. All you have to do is remember his Common Core mathematics thing, the thing that made no sense, that he tried to foster upon every school in America. It was like new ways of doing mathematics that didn't actually work. It didn't make any sense. It was just pure to scramble minds to reset them so they couldn't think anymore. And here we go again. And he admits last week that his needlecraft didn't work, and he laments the success. He lamented the success of the human immune system in fighting the coronavirus. This guy is a nut job par excellence, and I don't know who made him God. He's a computer nerd who came from a very wealthy family. His parents brought him a computer in the 60s. That would have been like if he was interested in aviation and they bought him an F-16. And that's how expensive they were back then. And he's a demon. He's a monster.
And he doesn't eat this shit. What do you want to bet? He has his own huge organic garden on his compound or wherever. He's not taking this fucking shit that everybody else is getting put into their bodies. There's no way.
He probably eats in Michelin star restaurants every day of the week. And it's outrageous that people are even tolerating him. And the whole thing of processed foods to that. Look, there's also not a problem. We haven't had a famine even in Africa in a very, very long time. Even small European countries that are heavily populated, like Holland and Ireland, and lots of them, they all produce huge amounts of food, more than they can eat in very small areas. There is not a food production problem, but then he swings it around to the climate change nonsense again. And that's supposed to be, everything has to be stopped according to that. There is no food production problem. It's in the world. We're producing lots and lots of food, probably the most ever. Agriculture has never been more efficient than ever before. And food distribution, everything's going great. What's the problem? The problem is that he's not controlling it. That's the only problem. He is not God yet. And that's all this is about.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about this, Thomas, you always talk about them rolling the dice one too many times. Here he goes admitting that he is manufacturing organisms, and I'll just leave it at that. Yep. Everything that's occurred over the last few years. But this idea of manufacturing editing genes and all that, it's just, it's gone too far. And I just can only imagine there's another story we were looking at earlier of talking about killing ants with a virus rather than using pesticide, using a virus to wipe out. It's like they talk about losing bugs and losing pollen, losing bees and everything. But it's like all this genetic manipulation, that's what's probably having a big effect on the insects and on the bees and everything, is if they're going around collecting pollen from GMO crops, what does that do to the population of bees? What does that do to them? So I think that like once this, once the effect of all these GMO being released into the wild, it's going to have an effect on the entire food chain, not just on the small scale of what's in the controlled agricultural area, but on the entire macro system of the planet, the entire biosphere. So I just CRISPR and all this biotech stuff, it's black magic. It's going to be the end of the civilization.
Yeah, I think there will be a backlash though.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before a while back, but I have a suspicious theory that maybe all of this needle crafting and all of this gene editing stuff is to change our genetic makeup to the things that we can eat and digest to be able to assimilate this fake shit more easily, because that's I mean, the shit that they're talking about here, which is already in huge part what makes up most of the food supply, is it's like fucking a nuclear bomb to the DNA, to our DNA. It destroys it. So I wonder if that is also a big part of what's behind all of this genetic experimenting.
Yeah, I mean, someone said the other day, like, they showed this factory that they opened in Ontario that's like going to be the biggest food processing plant that's ever existed. And guess what? The product is crickets. You know,
yeah, we talked about that shit earlier too.
Yeah, it's like I mean, this is on every level. They're spooky and creepy and obnoxious, and they don't know what it is to be a human
Who's
being.
the motherfucker behind both those?
Him.
So take this a step further. We when we were talking about the climate thing earlier, I'm sure, Thomas, you heard the story about in I don't know if there's in some Oklahoma and a few other places. They said somewhere between like 2,000 and 15,000 beef cattle just suddenly died, and they were trying to blame it on climate change and everything. A heat wave, right?
They were shot. If they had heat stroke, they would have went down on their hind legs first,
right,
and be dead on their bellies with their heads pointing out, like you see in Africa. They were shot. And also, cows can handle, look at India, cows can handle incredible temperatures. There's millions of cows running wild in India. They were shot. They were shot.
They were put down in one way or another, whether there's, I almost want to say they used some kind of direct energy weapon, but that's the way my conspiracy theory tinfoil hat brain works, but loyal to the foil I am. But yeah, I wondered if so anyway, they wiped out all that beef cattle, and there's been all these fires going on of these food processing plants here in the US. And I do Uber Eats for my Matrix job, and nearly every single order I pick up, the people at the restaurant are like, "Hey, can you call the customer? We're out of this. Ask them if they want that instead." It's like nearly everyone. I'm like, "Fuck! All right, here we go. We're out of this. We're out of that. Do you want this instead?" And I'm not kidding you. It really slows down my workday because I have to make these 10-minute long diversions for them.
What would the shortages typically be?
Oh, it's all over. It's from like, I've noticed a lot. It's like fruit, processed fruit things. So like there'll be like a boba tea that they don't have the blueberry flavor. So they ask them, do you want a strawberry instead? But there's also things like, oh, we don't have the whatever sandwich it is today. Can I get this? But you know what's, now that you ask me that, it's mostly sweets. It's mostly sweets. So, but it's like where was I going with that? Sorry, I got distracted. Oh, but this idea though, that like all these, the beef cattle dying, the food, the limited stuff on the shelves and everything. It would not surprise me until if it's only a matter of time until we start seeing at the grocery store, like cricket food, dead crickets that we can pick up next to potato chips or something. There's they'll
process it into like Linda McCartney burgers,
bug burgers.
In any form, I'd have a cock in my milk before I'd have a cricket in it. It's as simple as that. No way. Yeah,
and there's a kid's YouTube video, meat in the tube. The meat in tube form is our old friend Anthony Bourdain would say. So there was a kid's YouTube video on the other day, and one of the things is a challenge. Like, and if you lose the challenge, you either have to eat soggy bread, a cricket, or something else. And it's like when the person went to eat the cricket, one of the other people on the YouTube video was saying something about, oh, well, if you eat crickets, you're doing something to save the world. And it's just, there's all this social engineering even going into the kids, not just with that, but with all the gender stuff too, and the pronouns and everything.
And I'm aware that our ancestors ate grubs and crickets, but we don't live like that now. We don't have to. We don't like. And what Timothy was saying about the genetic changes, to show the profundity of that, the reason why the Indo-Europeans became the dominant sort of European race, and also in India, was because 6,000 years ago, out of the blue, they developed an ability to digest lactic acid. And therefore, they could not only eat the meat of the cow, but they could drink the milk and make cheese and butter. And it gave them a tremendous advantage over the Proto-Europeans and the indigenous Hindus, indigenous Indians. They could make cheese that would last in winter and all kinds of things like that, protein all year round. Now, if they are messing with our genes, I would say that would be one of the first ones they try to switch off, would be the gene that allows us to process lactic acid. And it does make you wonder about all these people with lactose intolerance in recent decades.
And the gluten thing too.
And the gluten thing too. Very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just this thing of like Timothy was saying with the gene manipulation within people. It's like, take it one step further. It's like, are they just getting people ready to hook them up to the metaverse type thing, where people are just fed through a feeding tube of like Soylent Green type thing, and uploading people's daily life into the metaverse kind of thing. So conditioning people into a synthetic delivered to your door food. No longer eating normal human food. That's, like if you stop eating beef and if you stop eating normal animal fats, like Thomas, you were just talking about milk and butter and everything. It's like all that stuff is necessary for our brain function. So taking away animal fat, not only are you depleting those, but you're depleting vitamin B12 and B6 and all of those. Right. Without fat, your brain don't work, as T just said. And it's like, you can't coconut oil your brain. It's like you need animal fat. You need that actual non-GMO beef. But so it's like they're euthanizing all these cattle, and everything is going down in production. So yeah, I think Timothy's right that the processed foods and the needlecraft and everything go together, and these are they're changing the genetic makeup of the human being through the needlecraft and then the food that's going in. And those two things, obviously, yeah, those two have the perfect handshake, is using a software terminology there.
They're not going to get away with it. There will be a backlash against this.
Life,
but then was that the reason why Anthony Bourdain was murdered, because he was developing a cultivation of the lowest simple food and stuff like that?
I think so. And I personally think he was murdered, not suicide. He was, I don't think he committed suicide, but yeah, he was all about the simple food and street food and all these other, I fucking hate all these food shows that like make like raw turkey ice cream and like, putting sea urchin in your eggs, and stuff like that. There's all these weird ass
foam.
Yeah. Foam and reductions and bullshit that doesn't taste good. On
a fucking slate, Yeah. It's all bollocks. Yeah. And they also wrecked Nigella Lawson too. Remember that? She was very similar in terms of how she used to do her cooking shows, and suddenly, she's dragged through the media by her ex-husband, calling her a cokehead and everything like that. Interesting, isn't it? Like, anyone who promotes real food seems to have problems.
Yep. And here in the US, there's this this terrible problem about fats being an evil thing. That like everything's got to be low fat this, low fat that. And that's been around forever, but just since we've been alive, since, in our generation, just raised with the idea that fat is a terrible thing. And if you look around at Americans who don't consume a lot of fat, there's, they eat sugar instead, GMO sugar. Yeah. Corn syrups and everything here. It's like, sodas, there's corn syrup and the regular soda, and then corn syrup and the diet soda with aspartame, or with the different additional sugars put into it too. So it's like diet sodas have corn syrup in them and artificial sweetener, and then the regular sodas just have corn syrup. It's the strangest thing. And unless you're getting the Coca-Cola from Mexico.
Butter, one of the most healthy things you can eat.
Yeah, I put some in my coffee this morning.
Yeah, they made a phobia about butter.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best things you can possibly eat. And salt was another one. I remember when I lived there, they made a big deal about salt. And you had all these folks moving down to Florida, where you need salt in the heat, you could die. And then they're all dead after a year because they're on low salt. The doctors put them on low salt diets. Yep. And also there was eggs that had the
yolks.
And
they fucked up our salt too.
Yeah. And eggs had the yolks removed. There was another one that I always thought was weird.
Yeah, the cholesterol thing that they were on there for a while. Yeah, so it's like there's all this terrible social engineering done, especially to Americans. All you Europeans over there don't have it as bad as we do. So yeah, all that social engineering is crazy. So it's just I would imagine that here before long we're going to have all these food shortages, and then there'll be miracle cricket burgers that have they're, what did you call them, like John Lennon burgers? Is that what you called them, Thomas? Or
John Lennon burger? No, I don't want to call him that.
Oh, I misheard you. But that's like the perfect thing. I just imagine like the Imagine burger. It's going to be made of crickets and it's going to have John Lennon on it.
No. Linda McCartney makes a big range of vegetarian meals over here.
Oh, okay.
They're very, very popular. So Linda McCartney, I was just saying, like they'll
McCartney, yeah.
How they'll introduce them into it will be things like Linda McCartney burgers, things like that, or Linda McCartney sausages. They're a vegan substitute food.
Yeah, I heard McCartney. I was like, which Beatle was it? And I was imagining like a John Lennon burger. That's so.
All right, well, let's slide on into the psychic weather, shall we?
Yeah.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
Well, the psychic weather this week, the 1 year anniversary of the psychic weather, ironically, it connects with the real weather. This is a localized thing I've noticed. You may have noticed something similar where you live. For 3 days here in Ireland, we had blazing sunshine, but it was ice cold. There was a cold, icy wind that was blowing like somebody was holding a gigantic blowing machine or fan over the country and blasting it with cold weather. At the same time that the sun was blazing in the sky. So you had this kind of dichotomy. You had this paradox of a sun that was like a beautiful, almost Mediterranean sun, coupled with a blue sky, coupled with air that was like you were living in a refrigerator or in front of an air conditioner. And it made no sense. And I observed that it left people in a very in-betweeny state. They seemed to be acting very confused and at odds and out of sorts. Now, I don't know whether, the old thing that, weather magic, I'm actually reading about the Stormbringers in The Roots of Witchcraft by Michael Harrison. It's kind of like a 70s magic classic. And the storm makers are the storm growers, these witches who could actually create storms at sea and things like this. And it has a very ancient pedigree, and it's rooted within the paranoia of the culture. So, for instance, there's long been believed that John Dee and some English witches caused the storm that sunk the Spanish Armada, and the charge for that sinking of the Spanish Armada was the terror of an imminent invasion by the Spanish landing on England's shores and conquering the country. And they utilized that charge to create a storm in the sea that destroyed the Spanish Armada. So I don't know whether the weather is strange and bizarre in that way because of what's happening in Eastern Europe and all the various contradictions in society. We live in a kind of a period of like nonstop gaslighting right now, where I don't think anyone knows what's real anymore. Well, maybe people like us who look at the odd side of things do, but the average person doesn't. And I think it's like, the old cartoon where they'd show somebody who was depressed all the time and they'd show it as a cloud over their head, raining, bad weather. I know for a fact that the psychic state is affected by the weather. So my psychic weather report this week would be that there are weather oracles and auguries we should be paying attention to that are telling us what we know already, that there's a schizophrenic state in society. But I think we should really start to pay attention to the weather as an augury again. The whole thing of, using the climate mancy, cloud mancy, all these kinds of things to see what's going on. Because I think right now the weather is acting as a kind of a translation software of what's really going on in the zeitgeist. And that's the week in psychic weather.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
That's a great psychic weather with the old axiom as above, so below. Like we were mentioning earlier, the weather here has been very fall-like. It feels like October, which is the time of year when I activate. And I'm always most calm and comfortable when there's storms outside, actual storms. Some people are really calm when it's, sunny and everything out. I kind of hate that shit. It makes me feel a little uneasy. I don't know why. So the weather outside now, it actually has me feeling calm because it almost feels like there's a storm on the horizon. And just, there's a lot of rain and it's been really overcast. And so my emotional state has actually been very calm. But the world around me, in my local community and then, national and worldwide, there's just so much insane psychotic shit going on. People are really losing their shit and, people's personal lives are falling apart. And, but I just sort of feel like kind of floating on top of all of that. I'm comfortable in a storm. So paying attention, the emotional storm reflecting the storm, the weather storm. And if you're comfortable in storms or you like that kind of stuff, it's gonna be a really great time. People who have an adverse effect to that, they're feeling very uncomfortable right now. Okay. This one's for Jason. 5 true stories about the military's paranormal activity research. What if I told you that the Department of Defense and the CIA spent 4 decades researching extrasensory perception and psychokinesis, i.e. bending spoons with your mind? From the 1950s to the 1990s, the military intelligence communities investigated psychic phenomena, conducted clandestine missions that relied on subjects believed to have supernatural powers, and competed with the Soviet Union in a psychic arms race. In Phenomena, the Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis, published in March, investigative journalist Annie Jacobson explores the bizarre world of government-funded research into the paranormal. The responsibility of the Defense Department and CIA is to be aware of what the enemy is working on and to create programs to counter it. Is this the chicken and the egg scenario? Is this the military-industrial complex? Task and Purpose spoke to Jacobson to discuss how it all started and how it was allowed to get as far as it did. Here are 5 crazy but true stories about the government's research into psychic phenomena. Number 1, it started with the Nazis, some of whom were obsessed with black magic. Can you see a theme? In 1945, with the Nazi regime defeated, members of an elite U.S. scientific intelligence initiative called Operation Alsos made their way to Berlin to scoop up as much intel as possible on German military projects. In the bombed out remnants of a villa in an affluent neighborhood in southwestern Berlin, they uncovered a cache of documents and artifacts that were part of I'm not even going to try to use that word. It's a German word. Heinrich Himmler's science organization, which was well-funded and vast. It even had an entire branch devoted to the survey of the so-called occult sciences, Jacobson writes in Phenomena. The high-ranking Nazi leader was obsessed with the occult. On Himmler's orders, SS officers raided Germany's occupied territories for artifacts related to magic, even ransacking museums in Poland, Ukraine, and the Crimea for mystical texts. Nazi scientists scoured the globe for items like the Holy Grail and the Lance of Destiny, the spear thought to have killed Christ. In that organization...
And the Crimea for mystical texts.
Okay. Okay. In that organization, there was ESP, psychokinesis, map dowsing, an element of what you could say that was supernatural or the paranormal. In the villa's basement, the researchers found remnants of Teutonic symbols and rites, as well as a baby skull in a corner pit of ashes. We later learned that the Soviets had captured an equal probe of information on this same subject, and when we learned that they were working in this area, you could say that this is the origin story of the psychic arms race. Number 2, the Cold War arms race spilled over into psychic research. The United States' foray into the psychic research took off in the 1950s when it set about countering Soviet mind control. Thought to be a legitimate concern at the time, and it was based, at least partially, off of Nazi research uncovered in Germany. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union relied on the caches of Nazi research they recovered, some of which detailed experiments conducted at concentration camps where Nazi scientists pushed human physiology to extremes and monitored the results. Now the CIA and the KGB would conduct similar experiments, each side arguing that the other side's program required countermeasures to defend against them. This fear of Soviet mind control was reinforced by videos of American prisoners of war reciting communist propaganda. Decorated World War II hero Nina Kulagina was the Soviet Union's most famous psychic, rumored to have the ability to stop an animal's heart beating using psychokinesis, the supposed ability to perturb matter with the mind. We look back and say now, that's ridiculous. You can't brainwash someone, but it certainly looked that way when you watch those old black and white images of those POWs. Jacobson explains, adding that the government's exploration into psychic phenomena began as part of MK Ultra program. The CIA-backed mind control program, MK Ultra, officially started in 1953, ran well into the 60s, and involved dosing American citizens with biological and chemical agents. We just mentioned all that, like LSD or acid, often without the individual's knowledge. While they were looking into mind research and how to input behavior, the MK Ultra subproject 58 became significant, which is the program to use drugs, which they call psychopharmacology, to enhance psychic functioning in psychic people. It's a real jumping off point for understanding how and why this race against the Soviets began and why it's legitimate in many ways. Both the Soviet Union and the US government pointed to others' research into mind control, counter mind control, and psychic phenomena in general as justifications for their research. There were stories of Americans putting telepaths on nuclear submarines, of Soviet mind control rays, and a Russian psychic so powerful she could stop the heart of a frog with only her mind. With each new rumor, some based on actual experiments, others little more than disinformation campaigns, the psychic arms race picked up speed. Number 3. That time a secretary with psychic powers found a downed Soviet bomber. The government's research into psychic phenomena often jumped back and forth between the DoD or the CIA, with a program being shut down after inconclusive results, only to open up under a new name. In the 1970s, the remote viewing program was owned by the Defense Department. Remote viewing is essentially the idea that someone can visualize details of distant people and objects through telekinesis. A remote viewing operations building was located on the Fort George Meade Army facility in Fort Meade, Maryland. A small operation was run out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Its chief employed a secretary, Rosemary Smith, who believed she had psychic powers. It was a very small budgeted program because most people thought it was insane. That changed in times of emergency, like in 1976, when the remote viewing team was given a whopper of a mission. A Soviet bomber had gone down in the jungles of Africa, and the CIA and military intelligence had used every intelligence collection means available to them, from satellite technology to, what is that?
Signal intelligence.
To signal intelligence, to human intelligence, and they had absolutely nothing. With nothing to lose, the military contacted the remote viewing operation at Patterson, and they put the secretary, Rosemary Smith, on the job. And she was able to draw maps that pinpointed where this aircraft was within a few miles. The cable was sent to the CIA, and they sent a paramilitary team out to the jungle. And near the area where Rosemary Smith said it would be, they saw a villager carrying a piece of aircraft out of the jungle, and that led them to the aircraft. It was an earth-shattering event. A psychic was able to produce actionable intelligence that no one else could. Number 4. Then there were the men who stared at goats, among other things. One army unit detailed in Jacobson's book, known as Detachment G, was established by top-ranking officers who were leery about the idea of bringing on psychics for research. So they stocked the program from within the Army's ranks. One of the unit's taskings was remote viewing, and in September 1979, the National Security Council called on Detachment G to use their remote viewing powers to investigate a Soviet naval base. What? Oh. While concentrating on a photo in a closed envelope, one of the unit's members described seeing a building on a shoreline, which smelled of gas and industrial products. Inside the building was a large coffin-like object, a weapon with fins like a shark. A few months later, the CIA received satellite imagery showing the Soviets had constructed a new ballistic missile submarine. Later made famous by its NATO designation, the Typhoon class, the hulking nuclear sub was known in the USSR as the Akula, Russian for shark. If this sounds like the basis of the men who stare at goats, that's because it is. And number 5. And guess what? We still haven't given up on this research. Presently, the Office of Naval Research calls this program anomalous mental cognition, referring to a $3.9 million program founded by the ONR in 2014 to investigate the existence of precognition, which they refer to as a spidey sense. Yes, just like in the comics. In 2006, Army Staff Sergeant Martin Richburg sensed something odd about a man at a cafe in Iraq. After clearing out the patrons, he discovered an improvised explosive device that the man had left behind. Whether it was instinct or something more, researchers are understandably curious to see if there's a way to trigger that kind of insight. Non-invasive electroencephalography based brain-computer interface enables direct brain-computer communication for training. Because of the stigma surrounding ESP and really anything having to do with the supernatural, the nomenclature has changed. But Jacobson argues that the research continues and the underlying goal remains the same. In essence, you have this idea, which really became the core and theme of phenomena, which is it fact or is it fantasy? Or will advanced technology, this remarkable system of systems of technology the government has developed, which includes computer technology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology, will this rubric of advanced technology allow us to solve this age-old mystery, whether or not extrasensory perception exists biologically?
Yes, it does. I love this article. The only thing that irritated me about it is when they were talking about brainwashing, and they said, "Well, back in the day, we thought it was all nonsense and everything, but now we know that it's all." Or back in the day, we thought it was real, and now we know it's nonsense. It's just funny how those kind of things always get in there to debunk. But I do really appreciate this article and the way that it goes into some of these. I didn't know that Army intelligence was so much involved with this. I knew that naval intelligence was very interested in, especially the countering of brainwashing back in the late 1940s, with a few naval intelligence officers looking for a way to bust the brainwashing that POWs were coming back with, and also to look into the effects of post-traumatic stress and dealing with that. So that was a program that started back, like I said, kind of end of World War II era. But I had no idea that I had heard about the men who stare at goats, the people that was based off of with the G unit or the unit G. But I didn't know that there were so many other programs, especially closer to present time. But this stuff, I think it's really cool. And then the MK Ultra thing having an interesting tie-in to talking about synthetic foods and synthetic drugs, back to what Timony was just talking about in the previous story. You got to wonder what can be done too with the altering of foods now, and the amount of mass media that's being put out there, how those two things can be put together for kind of MK Ultra in the public. And but what they don't take into consideration with any of these projects really is what it means to be human. They still have a very Pavlovian concept of what it means to be human, just the meat. They're out there working with the meat golem type. And I guess you can take a sentient being and turn them into a meat golem. I made a video about this recently, about a month ago, about, when I talked about don't go into the light, the post-mortal light, and that whole concept of reducing people down in size. And I think that can be done. I think you can take somebody and flow enough information to them and make them think less of themselves, and then they're essentially reduced down to a meat puppet. And I would imagine that that's what a lot of media, not just mainstream media, but a lot of the alternative media out there in the last, I'd say since like 2015, we kind of had a golden age of the alternative media that, spiked somewhere in like the 2007 timeframe and ended somewhere around 2013, where there's a lot of really good stuff out there on YouTube and out on, back when Red Ice Radio was cool before they went all neo-Nazi and everything. Like there's some really cool stuff out there. And it just seems like the alternative media here in the last 5 or 6 years has just turned has just put some real bullshit ideas out there. Like there are no mountains, there's only tree stumps and things like that. There's a lot of just real bullshit ideas out there that again is just taking people's cognition and lowering it down. So anyway, I'm fascinated by this stuff, and I would like to read the book that it mentioned in this article. I forgot what it was called, but this stuff is great. I think Thomas, we talked about the Montauk stuff 2 or 3 weeks ago too. And
you get the impression though, reading even in the military, it's all a coincidence, like this woman perfectly describes the location of a submarine base in Russia, Oh, it's amazing, but it's just a coincidence. It was a lucky guess. This still seems to be how they approach it, even in the military. It's like they don't want to actually take that next leap out of their out and thinking and say there's something magical or supernatural happening. It's almost like, well, there's some people are really good at guessing. That's almost like how they approach it.
It's like the public facing side will do that, but having been in the military, it's like I served with a number of people that had like a real, not woo-woo sense of things, but like I served with this one NCO who she was a drill sergeant at one period in her career. And she did this thing with her soldiers where before they went to the rifle range to qualify, she had them the night before visualize laying there in the prone or whatever position it's in. Like they were laying down on their beds, eyes closed, and visualize, okay, now you're in the prone and you're looking down the sights at the target, and you take your breath in, you exhale and take a shot, and the shot is, dead center. She was having them visualize their next day at the rifle range before they went and qualled. And she always had really high marks from her troops that she was just training. And it's like there's enough people like that I served with who are, I'd consider them like, Thomas, you have a term for it, natural, intuitive magicians. There's a lot of intuitive magicians that I served with. Sergeant Major Cook, Charles Cook, he's on my friends list here. If you're watching, Sergeant Major, you're one of those types too that I would consider an intuitive magician. He's into Wagnerian stuff and all kinds of really cool things. But so yeah, there are people that will deny it and say that it's just coincidence, but there are enough people in the military who do these things and wouldn't even call it magic, but they do it innately. So that's something, like I've said before, I think anybody who served in the military would make a really good ceremonial magician, would make a really good ritual magician. There's so many crossovers there. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to it. It is a fascinating subject and stuff like this, but I would like to hear some new stuff. We've been hearing the same stories now for years now. I would like to hear some other developments. I think the U.S., it's almost like the U.S. military has said, well, it ends with this, and it's basically, that's the end of it. I would be interested to know what other governments are doing, like what other militaries around the world are doing. That's what made that story, the first one, the second one that Timothy did, made it so tantalizing, is that we got probably a hint into their to that shit too as well, which I'd be surprised if they weren't. But I mean, I want to know more now. I want to know more about, are the French Secret Service doing it? Are the Israelis doing it? Are the Indians and the Pakistanis doing it? I want to know. I want to know more about this stuff, not just from a US-based perspective, but what other military services are doing it.
Yeah, and also too, even from a US-based perspective, I'd be curious what the private sector is doing. Like we've heard about naval and army intelligence, but what about these private sectors? And that's where I think, all this is going on. We talked about earlier, if the fact that someone like there's a Crowley type out there who's hidden, that's really cool. Right. Who's the Western Crowley, and what other private sector stuff is going on that's really cool. And we're not going to hear about it because all that stuff's classified, and there's going to be so many layers, and that's what makes the occult.
We're old, when we're like 70.
Yep. When Tim and I are like 70, some of that stuff will become declassified, is what was going on post 2020 and beyond. But it's like, yeah, that's what makes the occult and not the everything published. It keeps it secret. So make the occult hidden again.
Well, we have come to our 2-hour mark, and I think this is a really great place to kind of wrap up our 1-year anniversary. If there's anything we want to say here at the end, Thomas, do you have anything?
No, I'm delighted we made it to a year. I had no doubt that we would, and I'm sure we'll be having our 5-year one eventually. And yeah, I mean, it's like, I think someone has told me that there's people out there, we have copycats, that are people trying to copy our format.
That's the greatest compliment ever.
Exactly. So someone has told me that. I haven't seen them, but we have some copycats trying to copy our format. And so, I mean, that's, like I said, that's only a good thing. It shows that we were trailblazers. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. And 47 is also a magical number, so that was worked out perfect as well. So yeah, well done, us.
Yes, congratulations, Beyond Room 313. And that extends out to the greater Beyond Room 313 family. It's all of you guys. it's a pleasure working for you guys and working with you guys. And thank you so much for everything you give back to us. I'm looking forward to many, many more years, and especially this upcoming September where we get to meet as many of you as possible in person. That's just, I can't believe that's actually really going to happen, especially after the past 2 years of travel bullshit and whatever, fuckery has been afoot. Fuckery is afoot again. Yeah. Gosh, I can't think of anything else to say right now other than
we have a music video debuting on the solstice.
Oh, yes, that's tomorrow. So happy Solstice Eve, everybody. Find something fantastic to do with your family or friends or alone, if that's more your jam for tomorrow. Yeah, butt chugging on the solstice should be a good one.
And I wanted to say my closing thing for today and for the 1 year, Thomas and Timothy, you both talked about the idea of there being Crowleys and people like that. Who are they in the West? Well, I'll say this group of people here in the tribe. We are the next group. Thomas, you said the next agape. We are trailblazing right now. And if there's anybody, we're growing it right here. So it's been an honor. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of The Week in Strange.
Ave Lucifer, long live the horn gods.